When you're part of a high-growth company, you need to find new ways to work and get them working quickly and easily. That's the situation the stock administration team at Atlassian found ourselves in a couple of years ago. Atlassian's growth in the past few years meant that we needed a sea change. We didn't start out with the lofty goal of transforming our work. The scope grew as we went along. We didn't realize how much we'd transform our work or how much fun we'd have learning and using all the technical tools we use, like JIRA Core, JIRA Service Desk, Trello, and Confluence. These tools are for all teams. After all, why should software teams have all the cool toys? I'll start today by giving you a brief overview of what I do at Atlassian. I'll then cover why we changed how we work. Then I'll dive into specific examples of how we use the various Atlassian products. And then give you some tips on how you can transform your work and win peer recognition awards. Let's start by setting some context. Most people don't know what stock administration is. Some of you may have looked at the session description and thought, the topic sounds interesting, but I'm not sure what the speaker's functional role is. And that's okay. Most people have never heard of stock administration, and believe me, no one grows up saying that they want to be a stock administrator. So what does stock administration do? We're the team that's responsible for managing all of the employee-facing stock plans that are part of our compensation at Atlassian. We manage all of the legal, regulatory, and tax requirements for all the countries in which stock is offered to Atlassians. Because of all these requirements, we're under a lot of scrutiny from both internal and external auditors, so we have a lot of compliance activities and separation of duties that has to be maintained. We're also responsible for providing education and information about the stock plans to employees so they understand what a great benefit Atlassian has provided. With over 4,000 Atlassians in 11 countries, that's quite a lot for our team of 3 to handle, especially given the tools we typically use. For our function, these are email, spreadsheets, documents, calendar reminders, checklists, shared folders, and maybe a service desk in larger companies. That probably sounds familiar to those of you who may be in similar employee-facing roles. If all those other tools are commonly used, why change? After all, they're easily available and pretty well understood by most people. We found that we were getting bogged down by the volume of work that needed to be completed in a short period of time, especially at the end of fiscal periods like month end and quarter end, when we have only a really short amount of time, typically 1 to 3 days, to audit the previous period's activity and ensure the data for the finance and tax teams is complete and accurate. We also work very closely with an external vendor to manage our stock plan data and needed a better way to track issues and resolutions with them. We had a JIRA Service Desk for responding to employee questions, but didn't really use its full capabilities. And the same with our pages on Confluence, which had outdated information and were not as useful as they could be. So how did we start? We didn't sit down one day and say, we need to automate. We were actually looking for ways to manage our Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX controls better without the use of shared folders and emails. If you're not familiar with Sarbanes-Oxley rules, these are the U.S. Securities and Exchange Control regulations that all public companies in the U.S. have to comply with. So they're really important to get right. We chatted with some colleagues in finance and found that they were using JIRA to manage their SOX controls and hold their documentation. We worked with an internal JIRA administrator to set up our controls one at a time until we felt comfortable that it was going to work for our team. As we went through the process and started using JIRA, we were really impressed with what could be done, and we started coming up with more ways to use it. JIRA alone wasn't the right tool for everything we were trying to do, so we branched out to Trello and Confluence. Keep in mind that no one tool is a panacea. Each tool has its own strengths, and the combination of different tools is what worked well for us. I'd encourage everyone to play around with the different products. Try one out. If it doesn't work, don't worry about it. Try a different one. Not only can it be fun to learn the different tools, but you might find that you're able to streamline your work with each iteration, so in the end, your processes are really clean. Let's take a deeper dive into some of the ways that we've used the Atlassian suite. As I said in the beginning, stock administration teams, like many other G&A functions, typically use email, spreadsheets, calendar reminders, etc., which is where we started as well. Where we are now is a very different place. We have scheduled workflows in JIRA Core to replace email and calendar reminders, providing us with complete audit trails for our SOX controls and recurring processes. Internal and external projects with our vendor are documented and easy to track within Trello, while our Confluence pages have updated content that's linked to our JIRA Service Desk's knowledge base. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, we initially started using JIRA because we were looking for ways to manage our Sarbanes-Oxley controls better without the use of shared folders and emails. JIRA is ideal for managing compliance-related activities. Through the use of a marketplace scheduler, recurring tasks can be automatically scheduled on any frequency. We can schedule controls and store documentation in tickets, and it automatically generates an audit trail as well. We no longer need calendar reminders, which can be easily missed and are hard to track, and each recurring task can have its own frequency, daily, weekly, monthly, annually, whatever is needed. JIRA allows us to set up custom workflows, which can be really simple, such as one where one person performs the task, attaches their documentation, and sends it to a reviewer who can then approve or send back for rework. Or you can have really complex workflows involving many teams, which I'll show you in just a minute. All workflow transitions are time-stamped with the user's name, making for a very clean audit trail. When internal or external audit requests documentation, we simply export the workflow transitions and the documentation, which are all contained within the ticket, and auditors love it. In fact, internal audit suggested other teams follow what we did because it makes SOX compliance so much easier. I'll show you our dashboard shortly too. Managers, you're going to love this for the visibility it gives you for resource planning. I mentioned on the last slide that you can set up complex workflows involving multiple teams. To really set up a workflow, though, you have to document your processes. Without that, your workflows won't be smooth, and you risk missing a step. Let's go through an example with one of our common processes, the equity grant process. We grant stock awards monthly to all new hires, and there's several audit points around this process, so it's important to get it right. At the beginning of each month, HR gathers new hire grant data and provides it to stock administration. We reformat it for the legal approval and send it to corporate legal, who obtains the approvals and sends back to us. We load the grants in the equity administration system, audit all of the data, and notify employees of their new awards. Seems pretty straightforward, right? It is, but look at how many teams this touches. HR operations, stock administration, corporate legal, the approval committee, and finally the employees. By setting up a more detailed workflow, we can see where we are in the process at any time, and each step is time-stamped. Anytime the original data file is touched, for example for the approvals, the new file is attached to the workflow and everyone has access to it. The system sends an email to the assignee of each task when it's their turn to process the data. When we were initially setting up this workflow, we met with all of the teams involved and agreed on a monthly schedule for this process, which is also documented as part of the workflow. This not only makes all deliverables really clear for existing team members, but also for anyone new joining the team. Here's an example of one of the workflows around a SOX control. You can see that JIRA allows you to attach labels to each ticket. Here we have 3 labels, which identify the higher level task this is part of, month end, the category of activity, SOX, and that RM number, it's the reference number of the actual control that this ticket relates to and links directly to a Confluence page which describes the control and how it's to be performed. Labels make searching for control activities easier when auditors ask for evidence or when we just want to see all of the instances of the performance of this particular control. We can search on that RM number and see all the previous instances that will be shown. In the comment section, we can @mention other team members when it's their turn to perform part of the activity, which automatically generates an audit trail with timestamps and usernames. It also has the ability to export out all the workflow transitions for auditors so they can see that the proper procedures were followed when the control was performed. Finally, you can see the schedule for this task and when the next occurrence will be generated by the system. One of my favorite features is the ability to set up custom dashboards in JIRA. As a manager, this is a really great tool. I can immediately see who on my team has tasks outstanding and how many, which tasks are open and their due dates, and which have been recently completed. Each team member can see which tasks are assigned to them, so if I or they ever forget to do something, JIRA is there to remind us so nothing gets missed. Once we saw how organized we could be with our SOX controls, we expanded our use to cover most of our recurring tasks, everything from daily U.S. payroll reporting of transactions to monthly, quarterly, and annual period close tasks. We use the same process for all of our workflows, starting with documenting our current process, streamlining where we could, and then implementing in JIRA. All of our recurring tasks are now set up as workflows. While a lot of our effort has been focused on automating our workflows, we also wanted to improve how we collaborated with internal and external teams. For this, we decided to start using Trello since it can be enabled for access by our external business partners as well as internal. We use it to manage projects and issues with our stock plan vendor and for our internal projects, as well as for brainstorming and organizing large projects. We initially started using Trello as a brainstorming tool within stock administration. We have a remote team with one member located in Manila and 2 of us in San Francisco, so we needed a more effective way to brainstorm that would work across multiple time zones since we couldn't be in the same room at the same time very easily or very often. We wanted to have a way to capture and organize ideas for tasks or initiatives that would make our lives easier, outside our day jobs, but which would help us do more than just our day jobs. The brainstorming list is to throw ideas on as we think of them. We then meet once a quarter to review what we accomplished in the prior quarter and prioritize for the new quarter. Most of these tasks or projects are internal to the stock team. They're not anything that impacts anyone else or that anyone else would even see. They're things that we want to do to further streamline our work. Some quarters, when we get really busy, not very many of the items get completed, and that's okay because it's just internal. Once we started using Trello for brainstorming, we found so many other uses for it. In fact, I liked it so much that I started using it at home too, even using it when I moved to a new house to organize the move and keep track of all those little things that need to be done when you move. Here's how we used to track issues with our main equity plan vendor. I'm sure many of you have a similar spreadsheet to track issues, either with a vendor or in a project. What we found was that this was really hard to use for ongoing tracking. We had a description column, but no way to track comments, decisions, or resolutions without making the spreadsheet even more unwieldy than it already was. Now don't get me wrong, spreadsheets are great for manipulating data, especially large quantities of data, but they're not very good for tracking projects or issues. We now use a shared Trello board. Our vendor and our internal team both have access. We have an inbox where we add new items to discuss at our weekly meetings, and then all the lists for issues and projects sorted by priority. It's really easy to see what's important. Items that are on hold are put in the on hold pending list with a tentative due date so that we don't forget about them. Once completed, the cards are moved to a completed list. A couple of my favorite features are that you can document actions, decisions, and questions directly into a card. Everything is date stamped and immediately visible to all team members. So 6 months from now, when I'm trying to remember what we decided on a particular issue, I can search in the completed list and quickly find everything related to that issue. Using a Trello board has made our meetings and our communications so much more efficient since we can all see the current status of each item and add notes as we discuss them during calls in real time. We've really gotten away from using email for these types of issues. The other nice feature is that if you have changes to your team, someone leaves, someone new joins, you just have to give them access to the board and they too have instant access to the full history. There's no lost knowledge when somebody leaves. Let's zoom in on one of the cards. You can see that this one had a description, a due date, a few comments, an image that was shared, and finally a completion date. Anyone with access to this board can view all the details and all of the history. Here's another example of one of our internal Trello boards. This board is specific to calendar year-end reporting. You can see the categories of tasks here are different. They're based on the type of task that needs to be done. So payroll reporting, filings, year-end communications, etc. Each card is assigned to a team member and they're responsible for ensuring that the task gets completed on time. Each card also contains a high-level description of the task, and tasks which have multiple steps have links to Confluence pages with the detailed step-by-step instructions. Boards can be copied over year to year and modified as tasks or processes change. This board, for example, is in its third iteration. For tasks that are only done once a year, having the instructions and deadlines from the previous year are really helpful when you're planning for the current year. Confluence provides a framework for our employee communications and education with informational pages, a calendar, and blog posts, which are the most common way we communicate internally. Our joke is that if it's not on Confluence, it didn't happen. Our employee education information was initially put in place for our IPO in 2015 and hadn't been updated much since. Over a 6-month period of time, we completely revamped it, not just updating the information, but restructuring the landing page to make more information easier to find. We added a subscribable calendar where we have key events such as earnings announcements and trading window open and close dates in there. Since we have a significant population outside the U.S., we even added U.S. stock market holidays to our calendar so our non-U.S. employees would know when the stock market was closed or only open half day and they could plan accordingly. We have an employee-facing JIRA service desk as well, similar to one you might use with your IT team. Employees can ask individual, confidential questions through the service desk. We use the knowledge base feature of the service desk to link to our Confluence pages. That way, when employees are opening a ticket, the keywords will suggest relevant Confluence pages, which hopefully answer the questions before they even get asked. Here's an example of how the knowledge base works. Let's say someone wants to know how to activate their account. They go into the service desk, select the category, and start typing. They enter the summary, activate. As soon as the keyword is recognized, the knowledge base suggests Confluence articles that might help without needing to actually open the ticket. We can track the types of issues we get most frequently and then take appropriate action in our education offering as needed. We recently decided to start using components in JIRA to get more granularity on the types of questions we're getting. We also implemented our first bot not too long ago to take advantage of the metrics our service desk can provide. We can now send email or Slack messages directly to the service desk where the bot creates a ticket. This helps us manage the inquiries we get from all possible sources, except of course those that get asked in the lunchroom. Speaking of the JST dashboard and metrics, who doesn't love data? Once you've started using one or more of these tools, Use the built-in metrics. The JSD dashboard lets you slice and dice your data how you want. We use it to check on the volume of tickets, the geo they're coming from, and the high-level topics or themes. If we get a lot of tickets on the same topic or from the same geo, we know we've got an issue that needs to be addressed. The top table here shows me the source of each ticket, email, JSD, or Slack, and the high-level topic. The second table tells me how many tickets of each category are open versus resolved, while the third table provides a breakdown of each category by geo. Where is the employee who raised the ticket located? Gives us a lot of information if there's questions of a particular type coming from one region. We've recently added components to tickets, which will be subcategories under the general category. It's kind of a broad term, and I'm interested in seeing the breakdown at a more detailed level. Confluence Analytics is a great way to see if your pages or blog posts are reaching their intended audiences. When you click on the Analytics link under the page title, you get a high-level overview of the number of page views, unique user views, and comments. Clicking on the View Analytics button gives you much more detail. Here, for example, I can see that on February 13th, the day after this blog was posted, over 1,300 users viewed this page. For a company with 4,000 plus employees, that's a pretty good hit rate for the first 24 hours. You can even scroll down and see who accessed the page, how many times, and when. Now, we all have these wonderful computers in our pockets. Let's use them. If allowed by your company's mobile device policy, use the mobile versions of the tools. They're all available for both iOS and Android. I'd like to share a personal story. This past Christmas, my family took a holiday in Palm Springs. I was the person designated from our team to provide coverage over the holidays, but I was able to keep up by using the mobile tools, not just on emails, but also on JIRA Service Desk tickets and Trello board updates by the vendor, because they were working too. I didn't need to be tied to my laptop. I could enjoy time with my family while providing coverage so my other team members could disconnect completely. Now that you've heard about my team's journey, let's move on to your journey and how you can get started too. Is there a pain point that really needs to be addressed, or a recurring process that you'd like to streamline? We started with the daily U.S. payroll reporting of transactions, not a complex process, but something that's done every day, and it's important to do correctly and timely in order to meet IRS regulations. Document your process next. I can't stress this enough. If you don't have a clear idea of what you're trying to organize or automate, you won't be able to proceed well. I know this is painful. No one really enjoys documentation, but this is such a critical step in managing your workflows. After you've decided what you're doing, review the various tools to see which one might fit. Remember, just because my team chose a particular path, your choice might be different, depending on what you're trying to do and how your team works. There's no one right answer, so pick a direction and dive in. How do you decide which tool to use? I'll share how we decided, but keep in mind that this was based on how we work, and this might be different for your team. As you saw earlier, we have a lot of recurring processes. Many of them have data handoffs, either within the stock team or to other teams in Atlassian. The workflows in JIRA Core help us manage those handoffs and give visibility to everyone involved in a particular process. Trello's been great for larger projects, especially when they involved our external vendor, since we can all view the same boards at the same time. Our pages on Confluence provided a scalable way of sharing a lot of information easily with the entire company. Having them linked to our JIRA Service Desk as a knowledge base is a plus for us and our employees, since the relevant Confluence pages are suggested as the tickets being opened. Experiment with what works for your team. It's okay to abandon something if it's not working for you. Remember at the beginning I mentioned that you might even win an award from your industry peers? Well, I wasn't kidding. Atlassian's stock team was honored by the Global Equity Organization at their 2019 Worldwide Conference with the Most Creative Solution Award for companies under 5,000 employees for our groundbreaking use of software development tools to manage our equity plan administration. We were thrilled to be able to showcase Atlassian products to our industry peers from around the world. I hope this has given you ideas on the types of tools that are available that can help you streamline your work, enabling you and your teams to do more with the same number of people while also working on strategic initiatives that make our lives more interesting. I encourage you to take action. By the end of next week, identify 2 pain points. They may be compliance issues, recurring tasks, or managing a vendor, which could benefit from being automated or streamlined. Decide which tool might apply to those 2 pain points and get to work. Make a plan to get access to JIRA or download Trello. Start documenting and talking with your team about how the current process could be better. A sea change doesn't have to begin with a bang. It can start small, with a trickle, which grows over time to become a tsunami that transforms how you work. Thank you.